In my previous life, I was set up by my parents and accidentally ended up in bed with a strange man. While fleeing in a panic, I didn't notice the smug curve of my sister's lips in the corner. A month later, I learned that I was pregnant. My family was overjoyed and forced me to have the baby. I had a massive postpartum hemorrhage and my life was hanging by a thread. However, my sister, holding my newborn son, knocked on the door of the heir to the Jing Circle's business empire. Later, after my sister married the heir by virtue of having his son, she sent someone to run me over with a car. Before I died, my mother sneered, "If it weren't for your sister losing her virginity because she liked to have fun, it wouldn't have been your turn. It's only because your sister is kind-hearted that she's willing to raise your son for you." My father filled the goblet in front of me with red wine and smiled amiably. "Yo-yo, today is your birthday. It seems like just yesterday you graduated from university. How time flies. Come and have a drink with Dad." I had a cold smile on my lips as I rubbed the wine glass in my hand but didn't drink. There was something in the wine. Just one sip would make a person dizzy. "Yo-yo, what are you thinking? Drink up quickly." My mother urged me impatiently, and my sister sitting beside me also had a calculating glint in her eyes. I licked my lips. Since they were so eager for me to drink, then I'd do it. Let me turn this family upside down. I'll personally destroy the business that my father has worked his whole life for, make my mother, who cares so much about reputation and status, a disgraced figure, and snatch away my sister's life of luxury and wealth. Sure, I'll drink. I picked up the goblet and took an elegant sip. In my previous life, I nearly died giving birth to his child. Now, whatever he does in bed later will be what I deserve. I curled my lips, feeling really impatient for what was about to happen. My parents stared unabashedly at my wine glass and even started to persuade me to drink more. There was too much of the drug in the wine, giving it a strange bitter taste. In my previous life, I downed a big gulp because it was the first birthday my parents had ever celebrated for me, and I didn't want to spoil their mood. I laughed. "I won't drink anymore. This wine has a strange taste." My parents were startled and looked guilty. "What strange taste? If you don't want to drink, then don't. Come, let's eat the cake. Annie, you cut it." With that, they handed the knife and fork to my sister. I sneered, "Why should my sister cut the cake on my birthday? She didn't let me cut the cake on her birthday either." My mother's hand, which was stretched out in midair, paused, and she said with an awkward smile, "We're celebrating your birthday. It's the same if your sister cuts the cake. She's younger than you, so just let her do it." I leaned back in my chair and said lazily with a smile, "No. I'll cut my own cake from now on." My sister got a bit unhappy. She picked up the knife and fork and gave me a taunting smile as she said, "I'll cut it just to piss you off." She wasn't really into cutting the cake. She was just used to snatching things from me. My parents just watched with smiles on their faces. I stood up, and the chair scraped noisily on the floor. My father complained, "Yo-yo, it's just a cake. Why are you getting so worked up?" My sister quickly cut the cake and said with an annoying smile, "Sister, sorry, it's already cut. Next time." Before she could finish her sentence, I picked up the cake and smashed it into her face. But that wasn't enough. I covered the back of her head with my right hand to make sure every bit of the cake was on her face and in her mouth. I had always wanted to do this on every birthday in my previous life. Sure enough, it felt great. Yo-yo, you crazy bitch. Let go of me. I'll beat you to death, you slut." My sister struggled in my hands, blurting out obscenities incoherently. My parents also rushed over in a hurry to help her. I slightly raised my eyebrows and let go of my sister. Then I grabbed a piece of cake with each hand and smashed them into my parents' faces, laughing wickedly, "Mom, Dad, are you here to have a cake fight with me too?" Instantly, my parents' faces were smeared with a big mess of cake, looking both embarrassed and ridiculous. My sister wiped the cake off her face and, looking at her dirty limited edition Gucci skirt, was so angry that her face turned red. She picked up the cake on the side and wanted to smash it into my face. My mother quickly stopped her. "Annie, no." My sister seemed to remember something. She withdrew her claws and teeth and said through gritted teeth, "Today is sister's birthday. I won't argue with sister. I've carefully prepared a big gift for you. You'll surely like it later." I said with a smirk, "Oh, I'm sure I'll like it. Otherwise, it would be such a waste of the kindness from you and Mom and Dad." The three of them exchanged glances, as if sensing that I already knew something. But seeing that I had already taken a sip of red wine, they all let out a sigh of relief, assuming that I was just talking big. Heh, talking big? There's more to come later. After having my fun, I rubbed my temples and pretended to be exhausted as I lay on the table. My parents called me softly a couple of times. After confirming that I was asleep, they helped me to the top floor of the hotel. The decor of the presidential suite was really something, and the bed was especially soft. Strangely enough, I had also lain here for a whole night in my previous life, but I didn't feel a thing. People really are moody creatures. "Annie, you stay here tonight. When your sister leaves in the morning, you take her place. There's also something in his wine. He won't notice. Mom and Dad will go home first. We'll wait for your good news." My sister nodded and said with certainty, "Mom, Dad, don't worry. I'll definitely win him over." Ethan, the heir to the Jing Circle's business empire, a figure at the very top of the pyramid. He's of 4 ethnic mixes, and his looks can outshine even the top idol stars in the entertainment industry. He also has a great body, with 8-pack abs and an inverted triangle shape, since he's been working out since he was young. Most importantly, he's a highly educated academic prodigy. He's only 2 years older than me but has already obtained a doctorate from Harvard. No wonder they went to such lengths to climb the social ladder by using this method to get close to the heir of the Jing Circle. Back then, they morally blackmailed the innocent heir of the Jing Circle. They said that since it was my sister's first time and she was pregnant, they forced the heir to accept this marriage. How shameless. Half an hour later, there was a sound of the door opening in the room. The sound of footsteps went from faint to clear, and finally, the bed beside me sank a bit. The smell of alcohol instantly filled the air, and I frowned slightly. Suddenly, a big hand was placed on me, and then I was looking into a pair of amber almond-shaped eyes. The long lashes fluttered, and his eyes were full of my reflection. And there was also a lot of confusion. "You?" His slightly hoarse voice rang out. I placed my index finger on his lips and said with a smile, "Don't ask. Just enjoy the moment. Think of it as a dream." With that, I sat on him, feeling the heat of his body as I unbuttoned his shirt one by one. The hazy moonlight streamed in through the window, and his diamond buttons sparkled. No wonder he was a super-rich tycoon. Even his buttons weren't just ordinary rhinestones. He seemed a bit uncomfortable and whimpered softly, so hot, so uncomfortable. I didn't get to fully experience this in my previous life. This time, I won't be polite." Afterwards, he rubbed against my ear like a puppy, his voice hoarse and gentle. "What's your name?" I mumbled in response, "Yo-Yo." He contentedly hugged me in his arms and fell into a deep sleep. As the sky was just starting to brighten, I slowly opened my eyes, not because the sunlight was too bright. It was because there was a rustling sound at the door of the room. I glanced out of the corner of my eye at the pink skirt in the corner of the cabinet and was completely awake. My sister was waiting for me to leave so that she could take my place. I reached out and grabbed the cell phone on the bedside table. It was 6:12. I contacted the media paparazzi anonymously. Half an hour later, they would be at the door. I wasn't doing this to make Ethan take responsibility for me. Instead, I wanted to use public opinion to put pressure on my parents. Otherwise, if they knew that I had snatched my sister's beloved man, there would be a huge uproar. I haven't turned this family upside down yet. How could I leave this family early? That would be too unprofessional. "Yo-Yo?" A hoarse and somewhat dazed voice rang out beside my ear. I looked up and met Ethan's beautiful almond-shaped eyes. I glanced out of the corner of my eye at the corner of the wardrobe, then lowered my head and kissed his flushed lips, whispering with a chuckle, "You did great last night. I'm very satisfied." A suspicious blush appeared on Ethan's cheeks. Is this the happiness of a pure-hearted man? The hand he had around my waist tightened slightly, making me feel his hot chest and his pounding heart. Yo-yo, who let you come to my room? Who let you get close to me? As soon as his voice fell, I kicked him directly in the waist. Then there was a plop sound. He fell to the floor. The floor was covered with an imported Persian carpet, which was very soft. He rubbed his waist innocently. You actually dared to kick me? I immediately walked over, bent down and whispered to him, aren't you curious who sent me? Act a scene with me, and I'll tell you everything. Ethan slightly raised his eyebrows, and when he curled his lips, there was a cute little dimple. Okay. This was hardly the unapproachable heir as rumored. He was just like a big brother next door. He bent down to pick up the clothes on the floor, fully exposing his muscular body. I got dressed. Although the clothes were a bit wrinkled, they were wearable. Ethan also finished washing up and getting dressed. He picked up the watch on the bedside table and put it on. It was a Rolex worth over 8 million yuan. His already powerful-looking hands were even more alluring at this moment. He saw me staring intently at his hands and thought I was eyeing his watch. He chuckled, like it? I'll give you one. I swallowed hard. A phrase that I used to scoff at before came to my mind. Men conquer the world, while women conquer men. Although I was a bit tempted, I held back. One shouldn't be too greedy. It was really strange. After being set up, the heir of the Jing circle didn't even question me. He actually cooperated with me. I was really lucky. So I definitely couldn't take his things. No need. You worked hard last night too. Ethan. Ethan opened the door and was caught off guard by the horde of reporters and flashing cameras outside. He immediately turned around and covered my eyes. At that moment, there was an inexplicable flutter in my heart. I pried his hand open and threaded my fingers through his, interlocking them. It's okay. It's not that blinding. I have a bright and beautiful appearance, so even without makeup, I look good on camera. I had a smile on my lips and looked poised and confident. Surprisingly, you guys are so amazing. I just started dating Mr. Sure and you've already found out. The buffet downstairs is good. I'll treat everyone to it. Take good pictures, okay? No reporter could resist the temptation of food and a charming remark. They all nodded with smiles. Ethan wasn't a fool. He lowered his head and asked me softly in my ear, did you arrange all this? I turned my head, and my lips inadvertently brushed against his cheek. He stared at me, his expression inscrutable. I licked my lips and whispered in his ear, anyway, you didn't lose out last night. Do me a favor, or your reputation will be ruined too. I'd heard that big shots don't like being threatened. So, I quickly traced circles on his palm. Ethan nodded and gave a light snort, fine. This short video of our interaction was completely recorded by them, and everyone had an indulgent smile on their faces. I also curved my lips and led them to the buffet on the 3rd floor. Then Ethan and I sat at a separate table. I was really starving as I'd been so tired last night. Ethan was hungry too, but he ate in a refined manner. He ate fast but was exceptionally elegant. After eating his fill, he took a handkerchief to wipe the corners of his mouth and leaned lazily against the back of the chair. He cleared his throat lightly and got straight to the point. Can you talk now? What on earth is your purpose in approaching me? Who sent you? I blinked and asked tentatively, can you handle whoever sent me? He nodded, looking noble and domineering. As long as it's a problem that can be solved with money, it's no problem. In this world, money can solve 99% of problems, and he indeed had the right to say such things. Do you know the Yo-Yo family group that deals in sports equipment? It's my father's group. I shook my head with a smile, bring it down. He looked puzzled. I didn't hold back anymore and said slowly, I was drugged last night too. The ones who drugged me were my parents. Ethan's expression turned cold. Fine, I'll send someone to investigate thoroughly. He was really easy to talk to. The power of new media is really strong. As soon as I got home, I found that Ethan and I were already on the hot search. Hashtag the young wife of the crown prince of the Beijing circle. Hashtag the true love of Ethan and Yo-Yo is so addictive. Hashtag this buffet was really worth it. The photos were all great, with both beauty and a good atmosphere. They were amazing. The short videos in it were so sweet. If I weren't the person involved, I would almost have believed it myself. My sister's dream of replacing me to marry into a wealthy family was completely shattered. Hilarious. She'd spent the whole night hiding in the closet for nothing. Yo-yo, how dare you come back? Who taught you, a girl, to climb into a man's bed in the middle of the night? You slut, you've completely disgraced our family. Facing my mother's angry accusations, I gave a faint smile and sat leisurely on the sofa. Don't you know how I got into his bed? Should I go to the hospital for a drug test? That one sentence left her speechless, her face turning pale and then red. If it got out that my parents had drugged their own daughter, their backs would be broken by people's gossip. My sister started to frame me. You took the drugs yourself and now you want to blame mom and dad? My mother found an excuse and started scolding angrily again. Yo-yo, you ungrateful wretch. Your father and I have worked so hard to raise you, and we even kindly celebrated your birthday for you. And you dare to accuse us of drugging you. But I didn't care about any of this and was too lazy to argue with them. I dug in my ears and said slowly, Ethan and I are officially dating. My father said excitedly, Really? You're dating Master Ethan? I nodded with a smile. If you don't believe me, open Weibo. Now it's full of blessings for our relationship to last forever. They quickly took out their phones to check if what I said was true. My father shouted excitedly, Great, great, great. Yo-yo, you've done an excellent job. You really are Daddy's good daughter. Although he was partial, in the face of huge interests, he always had only one choice. Interests outweighed everything. My mother was stunned and hadn't reacted yet. My sister was so angry that she threw her phone and screamed hysterically at me, You bitch, how dare you steal my things? I'll beat you to death today. Before she could finish her sentence, I raised my hand and slapped her 4 or 5 times with all my might. Instantly, her face was red and swollen, and blood oozed from the corners of her mouth. She stood there in a daze, as if she hadn't realized yet that I'd hit her. Is Ethan a thing? He's a person, not an object. You've stolen a lot of things from me before. That's all in the past. But if you ever dare to covet anything that belongs to me in the future, I'll kill you. I'd tolerated it before. But from the moment I was reborn, I was going to go crazy. Suddenly, the living room was silent. My sister was stunned by my scolding, and my parents were also taken aback. It felt really good to go crazy when you were unhappy. Using Ethan as a shield, with him as this big flag, I could go crazy without restraint. I sat lazily on the sofa, crossing one leg over the other, looking at my mother with a half smile. I'm hungry. What's for lunch? My mother's lips twitched a few times, and she hesitated before saying, How about I stew an old hen for you and steam some crabs for you? I frowned unhappily. I don't like steamed ones. I like spicy ones. My mother glanced at my sister, but Annie likes steamed ones. I sneered, What do I care if she likes them? I want to eat spicy ones for lunch. My father immediately chimed in, If Yo-Yo wants to eat spicy ones, she'll eat spicy ones. No steamed ones. I was satisfied. Dad is still the best to me. I told Ethan this morning that Dad deals in sports equipment. He said he knew. My father's face broke into a big smile like a chrysanthemum. Later, Dad will cook for you personally, my precious daughter. Immediately after that, a scene that had never happened in my previous life appeared in the family. My parents were running around for me, washing fruits for me, getting me yogurt, and even going out to buy duck feet for me. The preferences, snacks, fruits, and remote controls that used to be exclusive to my sister were all mine now. She stood on the side, looking at me with a venomous gaze. I scoffed. This was just the beginning. At noon, the table was full of dishes, all of which were my favorites. Even the fish bones were picked out clean by my mother, and my father kept piling food onto my plate. Soon, my small bowl was piled up like a hill. The chicken legs and crab roe that used to belong to my sister were all mine now. In front of her were the green vegetables and shredded potatoes that she didn't like. She ate this meal with a hideous expression on her face. I ate with great relish. After the meal, my father started showing off to his business partners. saying that he'd latched onto Ethan's coattails. Everyone had seen the reports and were all flattering and currying favor. Now my father was even more carried away, and his greedy and snobbish nature was on full display. I withdrew my gaze with satisfaction. The plan was going very smoothly. For the next month, this kind of life repeated itself. Of course, the only thing that changed a little was the text messages Ethan sent me occasionally. I don't know where he got my phone number from. He started asking me pointless questions. Have you eaten? How's the weather? Is it fun at home? He seemed to have slipped into the role of a real boyfriend quite skillfully, but I was only his fake girlfriend. When I was in a good mood, I'd reply to his messages. After all, it wasn't as interesting as playing tricks on my sister. My father gave me a supplementary card with 200,000 yuan on it, telling me to buy whatever I liked. So, when my sister whined and wanted mom to buy her something, I'd go and buy it and then enjoy her impotent rage. I looked at the 2 lines on the pregnancy test stick with mixed feelings. This time, just like in my previous life, it was a one-time hit. Recalling the pain of being forced to give birth by my parents in my previous life, it was still vivid in my mind. But the soft little body of the baby and its cute appearance also made me nostalgic. I let out a long sigh and gently stroked my still flat abdomen, whispering softly, "Baby, this time mom will definitely protect you. No one will take you away from me." I stared eagerly at the barren land by the beach. There were dilapidated houses and stinking ditches there, a place even vagrants disliked. But 6 months later, it would be requisitioned by the government. It was said to be worth 300 million yuan. Coincidentally, this piece of land belonged to Ethan. He had so many pieces of land that he couldn't manage them all. I licked my lips and sent a message to Ethan. "Would you like to have lunch together?" "Fine. Come to the company to find me." "Okay." I originally wanted to choose a dark-colored suit. After all, I was going to discuss a cooperation deal. However, looking at the bright red long dress, the slender waistline would show off my good figure. So, after hesitating for a moment, I still chose this dress and put on delicate makeup. It's indeed worthy of being the most expensive office building in the city center. The design fee alone cost more than 30 million yuan. The interior decoration is extremely luxurious. It's really hard to imagine that this is an office building rather than a 6-star hotel. The receptionist had already been waiting for me at the entrance, with a gentle and enthusiastic smile on her face. "Miss Yo-Yo, the president has already given instructions. When you arrive, please go to his office first. He is in a transnational meeting and will probably need another half an hour." I nodded. "Okay, thank you." It was just the time for lunch. A group of employees from the Sure Group were walking towards me, and they all showed their big white teeth when they saw me. I couldn't help but sigh that it was indeed a Fortune 500 company. The employees were so enthusiastic and polite. However, immediately after that, I heard some whispered discussions. "Is this the president's wife? She's so beautiful." "Me? Question mark. Gossip really spreads fast. Ethan's office is on the top floor, and the whole floor belongs to him. There are a lounge, a meeting room, an office, a bedroom, a study, and even a kitchen and a gym." I couldn't help but be amazed. In this prime location where every inch of land is precious, it's really extravagant. No wonder he casually asked me before if I wanted a watch of his worth more than 8 million yuan. Then, asking for a piece of land later should not be too difficult. I didn't wait for him in his office. After all, there were too many confidential things there. Instead, I waited for him while reading in the open study. Soon, the sound of leather shoes stepping on the marble floor could be heard. I looked up and met Ethan's eyes that were staring at me. His eyes were full of amazement. "Yo-Yo, you look really beautiful today." His voice was as low as always, with a hint of tiredness, but I could feel the happiness in his voice. Since I was a child, I don't know how many times I've heard such compliments. But when he said it, my heart fluttered inexplicably. Perhaps it was because he was in a formal suit, with a tie on, looking both restrained and alluring. Ethan pulled at his tie knot with one hand and unbuttoned one of the buttons. His big hands with distinct knuckles, the beautiful collarbone, and the sexy Adam's apple made the charm reach its peak at this moment. His low chuckle rang in my ears. Do I look good? My face flushed red, and I took several steps back, avoiding his gaze. Not bad. He laughed more heartily. What would you like to eat for lunch? I blinked. How about the company cafeteria? It said that the chefs there are all 5-star level. Ethan nodded, with a bit of pride. Yes. I thought that as the president, he would at least have some airs, but from the way the employees looked at him in the cafeteria without being surprised, I knew that he was a regular there. There were all kinds of cuisines in the cafeteria, like Hunan cuisine, Cantonese cuisine, and Sichuan cuisine. It was amazing. I couldn't help but close my eyes in satisfaction and praised without hesitation, the taste is really good. But the cost must be quite high, right? He nodded. Yes, the cost is indeed not small, but it's precisely because of this that the talent turnover rate is extremely low. I agreed, that's true. Who works hard not to be able to have a good meal? After that, we smiled at each other tacitly. It was really hard to imagine that this was only our second meeting. After eating, he brought me a fruit salad and a bottle of yogurt, and even thoughtfully inserted a straw for me. There was really nothing for a detail-oriented person to pick on. But I came to him today to talk about serious business. I came to see you to make a deal with you. The tenderness in his eyes gradually disappeared, and he said with a smirk, I knew you wouldn't come to me without a reason. What kind of deal? I leaned forward slightly, looking straight into his eyes. I know you recently cooperated with an American company on a scientific research project. This wasn't a secret either, after all. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was reported in the newspapers. He asked in confusion, and then? I said seriously, cancel the cooperation. Their patent is fake. They stole it from a competing company. His expression became solemn, and his voice was a bit cold. Where did you get this information from? I smiled faintly. You don't need to worry about where I got it from. You can send someone to investigate. Believe me, you can save at least 1.5 billion yuan. He didn't directly say whether he believed it or not, but asked instead, what do you want? I blinked. Wait until you've investigated clearly, and then ask me what I want. He nodded. Okay. After talking about the serious business, I got up and was ready to leave. Ethan grabbed my hand, looking straight into my eyes. Do you have anything to do this afternoon? If not, accompany me to an auction. His palm was big, warm, and gave a sense of security, which also made my heart flutter, but I still refused. No, I have something to do this afternoon. He withdrew his hand and smiled faintly. Okay. Why do I always feel that the way this man looks at me is a bit strange? After driving back home, I sat in the car for half an hour before suppressing the fluttering in my heart. Ethan was really an excellent man. He knew how to handle things appropriately, letting me know his feelings while still staying outside the safety line. If I had been braver in my previous life and hadn't run away from the hotel that morning, maybe the result would have been different. Unfortunately, now I just want to live a good life with my baby, away from all these messy things. Now my belly has already swelled a little, and my stomach is a bit disobedient. It's time to move out. After getting home, oh, sister, what did you go out wearing like this for? My sister said in a sarcastic tone when she saw me. Although she also looked good, she was shorter than me and didn't have as good a body proportion as I did, so she was quite jealous of me. I smiled faintly. Of course I went on a date and came back. Ethan took me to eat in the cafeteria of his company, and everyone called me the president's wife. These words were like an atomic bomb to my sister. She gritted her back teeth and glared at me viciously. Don't think you're so great just because you're with Ethan. I'll find a boyfriend who's richer than him. I shrugged and said casually, oh? Really? Good. She was even angrier. She clenched her fists tightly. Just wait and see. Just then, my parents also came back, and their faces looked extremely ugly. My father saw me and said excitedly, Yo-Yo, the company has had some financial problems recently. Go and ask young Master Ethan for some investment. I replied perfunctorily, he just went on a business trip abroad. I'll talk to him when he comes back. My father urged. You can also make a phone call. I smiled faintly. Dad, I've never asked him for anything before. If I ask for too little, he might look down on me. When he comes, I'll talk to him face to face. By then, it'll be easy to get 50 million yuan in financing for Dad, right? However, we can't ask for money too often, right? My parents nodded in deep agreement and didn't forget to praise me. Yo-Yo is still smart. The future of Dad's company depends on you. I smiled meaningfully. Okay. It has to be said that Ethan was really quick. He called me the next day. I've investigated clearly. It's confirmed that they stole the patent. I've already withdrawn the investment and filed a lawsuit. What do you want? I was packing my luggage while saying, the land behind the West Beach. Its current market value is only about 70 to 80 million yuan. In exchange for his 1.5 billion yuan, he won't lose. Okay, when will you come to sign the gift contract? Of course, the sooner the better for such a good thing, this afternoon. He agreed neatly. Okay, I'll wait for you in the company this afternoon. Why did I go to sign the contract in the afternoon? Because I was moving in the morning, and it happened that they were all not at home. I left some unused things there to create the illusion that I was still living there. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment with a garden in the city center, waiting to get the demolition compensation for the land and then leave the city. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but laugh. After successfully signing the contract, I went back to my newly moved home and started lying around and doing nothing contentedly. After 3 or 4 days like this, my mother called me. Yo-Yo, Mom made your favorite spicy crab. Come back early to eat tonight. I said while eating grapes without spitting out the skins. No, I'll eat outside. Dad's urgent voice came through the phone. Yo-Yo, I've checked. Master Ethan has already returned from his business trip abroad. When are you going to talk to him? The bank is already pressuring us for debt repayment. I can't hold on much longer. I curled my lips and made up a story. I talked to him. He didn't agree and even called me a gold digger and broke up with me. This completely broke down my parents. Words of pleading, scolding, and hatred poured out in an endless stream. I listened for a while before hanging up the phone with satisfaction and then blocked their numbers. But they kept changing numbers to contact me. So, I had to change my phone number, and finally, my phone became quiet. However, I was keeping a close eye on Dad's company all the time. Since the bank started pressuring for debt repayment, it had torn off the last fig leaf of his company. They couldn't find me. Dad could only start taking my sister to attend business dinners frequently. But actually, I was sitting in the private room next to theirs, enjoying the delicious food alone and listening to their voices drifting through the window. Mr. Wang, please do me a favor with my company. I'll pay you back as soon as the loan comes through. Oh, come on, Mr. Wang. As long as you promise to help, I'll keep you company tonight. Mr. Lee wants to join in too? Well, okay then. But remember, you must invest to help us. I promise to make you feel comfortable. From time to time, Dad's flattering words could also be heard. I put on my headphones. The soothing music replaced the noisy sounds. I stroked my belly with a smile and said gently, Baby, don't listen. They're all bad people. After they left, the waiter brought me the pinhole camera from their private room. I worked overtime all night to make a short video and sent it anonymously to media accounts. This kind of information spread really fast. My sister, who had worked hard all night again, got nothing and even had her reputation ruined. Originally, a few small banks had promised to grant loans, but now anyone who gets involved with Dad's company will be pointed at by everyone, saying there are improper relationships. Who would dare to lend money then? The day before the company went bankrupt, Dad went to see Ethan, but he wasn't even allowed to enter the company's door. He had to leave in disgrace. On the day the company announced its bankruptcy, it was quite a scene. There were people holding banners demanding their wages at the entrance. I also hired a dozen loafers to be the atmosphere group. I gave each of them 500 yuan to create an atmosphere. It was really worth it. They even brought rotten eggs, wilted vegetable leaves picked up from the market, and even human excrement. They pushed my parents into a corner and threw things at them. It made me feel like vomiting even from 5 meters away. Of course, such strange things made it to the news. Coupled with the video of my sister before, this family of 3 became internet celebrities. Like rats crossing the street, everyone was shouting to beat them. Because of the bankruptcy and wage arrears, all the properties under my parents' names were frozen. There were still a few thousand yuan left on my sister's card. They rented a shabby old apartment and were just barely surviving. Dad wanted to start a business again and had to borrow money from loan sharks. Great, he failed again. My sister and mom became prostitutes in dance halls. Many people came to tell me about these things, with all kinds of photos. I really didn't expect that. After changing my fate in this life, their retribution would come so quickly. But none of these things had anything to do with me anymore. I waited and waited, and finally, the land demolition came. The price was 300 million yuan, which was quite reasonable. I went to sign the contract happily, but unexpectedly, Ethan also came. He was wearing a crisp suit, standing by the window, looking at me lazily, exuding an air of nobility all over. He was definitely the domineering CEO who walked out of a comic book, and I was wearing a beige maternity dress with a cute rabbit ear on my belly. Because it was inconvenient to wash my hair, I had my long hair cut into short hair that reached my ears, and I had no makeup on. So the moment our eyes met, I turned around and walked away without hesitation, but before I could take 2 steps, my wrist was tightly grabbed. Ethan's face was full of shock, and his voice also carried some surprise. How many months along? I wanted to lie to him, but then I thought he could easily find out if he investigated. So I answered honestly, 7 months. He let out a sigh of relief, calculating by the time, it's mine, right? Thank goodness it's still mine. What did he mean? What did he mean by, thank goodness it's still mine? I raised my eyes to meet his gaze and asked seriously, what do you mean by that? Ethan was stunned for a second. I mean, I'm very happy. I didn't say anything and just quietly stared at him. From the beginning until now, including the envisioned future, there had been no trace of him regarding this child. Ethan reached out to touch my belly but withdrew his hand in midair. Actually, you might not believe it when I say this, but I seem to have been reborn. Before, I always thought it was your sister who was pregnant. Out of a sense of responsibility, I could only choose to marry her. But later I found out that the child wasn't hers at all. She was abusing the child and I caught her. During the argument, both of us got into a car accident. When I woke up, I met you again. Only then did I realize that the child was actually yours. I also know that you might not like me that much, but I hope you can give me a chance. Actually, I liked you a long time ago, Yo-Yo. I'm not talking nonsense. His voice was very gentle, like the slightly sweltering breeze in summer, making ripples in my heart. The amount of information was really overwhelming. It would be a lie to say I wasn't shocked. He was actually reborn too? I took a breath. Okay, I'll seriously consider it later. He let go of my hand and quietly accompanied me. When I walked to the table to sign, he reached out and covered the corner of the table. Everything was so natural. But he didn't know that my heart was beating faster. There were still many questions I wanted to ask. But I hadn't asked them yet. Looking at the seaside villa introduced to me by the agent in the video, with a yard full of flowers, it immediately made my heart flutter. Immediately, I booked a flight 2 hours later. But I really didn't expect that Ethan would be sitting in the seat next to me. I was shocked and asked, "Are you on a business trip to Hainan?" He shook his head with a smile. "No, I want to accompany you. I know the child is mine. I just want to spend more time with you and the child. I have to fulfill my responsibilities as a father, right?" Me. It was a bit cold on the plane. Everyone in the business class had a small blanket. I covered my belly to prevent the baby from getting cold. Ethan put his blanket on my shoulders and said seriously, "You take care of your baby, I'll take care of my baby." I couldn't help blushing and didn't dare to look him in the eye. When the plane landed, it was a bit rough. The baby must have been scared and kicked my belly. I furrowed my brows in pain. Ethan's big hand gently stroked my belly and coaxed softly, "Baby, don't be naughty. Mommy is having a hard time carrying you. When you come out, Daddy will take you to play football." The baby in my belly really calmed down, and being rich is really enjoyable. I didn't even blink when it came to the 12 million yuan villa. Since it was a new house, it needed to be decorated and couldn't be moved into immediately. Ethan helped me contact his soft decoration designer. The work would be completed in 6 months. Thinking that I could have my own home in 6 months, the corners of my mouth couldn't stop turning up. Ethan chuckled, "So happy?" I nodded with a smile, "Yes, of course. After playing here for a few days, I got a bit tired." Ethan took me back. His private plane was very spacious and the bed was comfortable to sleep on. I was a bit tempted and asked, "How much is this plane?" Ethan said calmly, "It's about the price of your land expropriation." It turns out that compared to the rich, I'm still poor. Ethan went to work. He would always come over and sit for a while in the evening, reading books to the baby Annie or making soup and cleaning up for me. It's really unimaginable that the Crown Prince would be so gentle and considerate. When I had free time, I went shopping in the mall. I bought bags and also some baby supplies. Unexpectedly, I ran into my sister. She was cuddling a bald and greasy man, whining and asking him to buy her a bag. And behind me was a driver, carrying a bunch of luxury goods. She stared at me with a venomous look. I just gave her a cold glance and then looked away. Now, she was using all her strength just to survive. She had a father who was addicted to gambling and a mother who was selling her body with her. After walking a long way, I could still feel a chill on my back. To avoid any accidents, I hired 2 bodyguards, but unexpectedly, she managed to sneak into the community. When I was taking a stroll in the garden to digest my food, she suddenly rushed out, with a dagger shining coldly in her hand. At the moment she rushed over, I turned around to run, but my sister's movements were so fast that I didn't have time to do anything. She had already appeared in front of me, with a hideous smile on her face. "Yo-yo, go to hell." At this moment, I felt the breath of death. Just when I was closing my eyes in despair, Ethan suddenly jumped out from the side and yanked me forcefully to the side. Immediately after that, I saw my sister's dagger stab brutally into his back, and the blood splattered onto her face. At this moment, she was like a devil. I finally screamed out loud, shouting, "Help!" My sister was so frightened that she fled in a panic, but she was quickly restrained by the security guards and sent to the police station. Ethan didn't go to the hospital. Instead, he invited a medical team to come to his home for stitching and treatment. I asked him, "Why don't you go to the hospital?" He forced a smile, "Hospitals aren't good places. I won't go there, baby." He knew that if he was in the hospital, I would surely go to accompany him. I asked him with red eyes, "Does it hurt?" He gently touched my belly. "My body hurts, but I'm proud in my heart. I've protected you and the baby. I'm very happy." At this instant, I could no longer hold back my tears. I hugged him and started crying softly. "I'm sorry. I knew there was danger. I shouldn't have gone out alone. I should have told you in advance." His index finger carefully wiped away my tears. "Yo-yo, you don't need to apologize. You have your own considerations. I also know that you've been through a lot. This time, it's my turn to protect you. Who could resist this?" Anyway, I cried even harder. That very night, I agreed to be in a relationship with him. As a result, he went to buy a ring and flowers for me with his bandages on. "I'm so glad that you finally agreed to my pursuit and became my girlfriend." I held the flowers and looked at the big pink diamond ring, feeling extremely touched. I couldn't help asking him, "When did you start liking me exactly?" After this incident, I knew he was sincere. He wasn't lying to me, and I also believed that he was truly reborn. Actually, we were schoolmates. Ethan blushed with embarrassment as he told me. It was when he saw me hosting on the stage during the freshman orientation that he fell in love with me at first sight. Later, he silently paid attention to me. Then later, when my sister said she was pregnant with his child, he even regretted that it wasn't me at that time. But things in the previous life couldn't be changed. He also said, fortunately, I was reborn. I smiled at him. Actually, I was reborn too. Everything is just right. He was really so romantic. He made me feel that I deserved the most wonderful things in this world. Just because I was who I was. My sister was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the crime of intentional injury for stabbing someone on the street. This time, I didn't need to take any action. Ethan found her some nice sisters in prison, making her life there a living hell. On the day she was released from prison, there happened to be a fight, and she, just a passerby, was seriously injured and had to live with a urine bag for the rest of her life. My mother died of an overdose after drinking and taking drugs while accompanying customers in a bar. My father owed too much money to loan sharks. His legs were broken, and he had to beg for a living. Eventually, he starved to death under an overpass. My sister endured for another 2 years and finally hanged herself in a small and shabby rented room. Looking at their ashes neatly placed together, I felt relieved.